Welcome to the Behind the Board on mixing drums with reverb. We're about to add some reverb to all these drum tracks, getting them to sound like they're played in a bigger room, giving them a little more smoothness to them as well. When you add that reverb in, it really will round things out a bit. So click on your drum bus and make yourself a new track. Go to track new or use your hotkey, make yourself a stereo aux track. That's what we will be using for our reverb. Go label it drum reverb. And that's it. Now we have our drum reverb track right down here. It needs to have a reverb on it, so let's put a reverb plugin in right away. Go to your reverb multi-channel plugin and pick Deverb. You could experiment with the other ones, of course, but pick Deverb for now. We'll be using that. And we want to leave this Deverb on 100% wet. We don't want any of the original sound, only the reverb from this track. We have the original sound coming out from our drum bus. And our drum reverb track here should be only reverb. So leave that at 100%. I'm going to leave it now just on a large hall like we're at right here. Should be good for us as a starting point. You could adjust all you'd like, but right now we're going to leave it as a large hall and talk about the theory behind this. So we need this track to have a bus in. So ins over outs, where we have this no input now. Go to bus and go to bus 5, 6. If you've been following along with me, 1, 2, and 3, 4 are already taken. So go to bus 5, 6 with that. It's going to accept anything being bussed out 5, 6. But we don't want to bus out with our I/O outs. We want to bus out with sends. So go over to this view selector, your edit window view selector, and click sends A through E. Now, we're going to work on one thing at a time here. First things first, I want to make these visible all the time. So I'm going to click solo. Okay, they are being muted when other things are soloed. Hit command and hit your solo button on both of those buses, and now they will not mute when other things are being soloed. Great. So let's go up. We'll start with the bass drum. Here's our kick. We'll put a send going out. Bus 5, 6. And we will use this fader. This fader becomes very, very important right now because we want to adjust how much reverb we're getting on individual instruments on the drum set using this fader. If you set everything to 0, everyone will be getting the same amount of reverb, which in reality would probably be true. If you're in a room and you're playing drums, the bass drum's not in this different room than the snare drum, and so on. But what we want to do is create an atmosphere where the snare gets a little bit more reverb, gets a little wetter because it sounds better that way. We could thank that to our friends in the 70s and 80s who wound up using different reverbs and plates on stuff, getting different sounds from different instruments, even though they were all played in the same room. So we'll have to adjust to that. Our bass drums, we don't want a ton of reverb on. So let's bring that down to around -12. And let's paste that to the rest of the bass drums. Here and here. The other thing you can do, and this is a route you could take, this is a route I do take sometimes. I think both sound good. I think this is a cool little way of doing it because you get your non-finished drum part going through this reverb section. Otherwise, you would just bust out your kick, bust through one of these sends, and you would not bust these. So it's one or the other. Try both ways. See which way you like. I just have a thing for this, how it's all very individual. I personally like it. It's definitely a personal choice for me. So try both ways. See which one you like better. But let's now move on to the snare. We could bring those buses down, and now we want to change the snare. I'm going to put right at 0. And all the snares will be right at 0. Again, same story I had last time. Your snare bus right here, that can be the bus out instead of these 3. Again, I like doing it this way for my own reasons, but try both ways. You might really like the other way, and I wouldn't blame you for it because it sounds terrific as well. Let's go over to our rack toms. I'd like them to have a little more reverb than my bass drum, but not by much. I'm going to bring that down to -8. And send that to the floor tom as well. My overheads, I want to be in the same area as my bass drum, to be honest with you. So I'm going to bring that down to -12 area right there. I copy that over here, and same deal with my room mic. I'm going to be in the -12 area. And you could adjust these individually and really spend some time figuring out where you like different things to be. But for right now, that's how I'm going to have it set. So let's just take a listen to what everything sounds like now. We'll just solo out the kicks and we'll hear it with some reverb on it. Oh, there's our problem. Sorry about that. Before we start playing back, I'd like to bust this into our drum bus. I want everything to end up in the drum bus at the end. I don't want separate things going out. So let's just bust this into the drum bus. So instead of A1, A2, instead of monitor 1, 2, whatever your mix reads, go to bus and go to 3, 4. Now this is being bussed out 3, 4, and drum bus is accepting all 3 4s. So if we just follow the signal flow in just one instrument real quick here, we have the kick drum. It gets through this EQ, through this compressor. It gets sent out 5, 6 for your reverb. So it goes to our reverb track. It goes through the deverb and gets sent out 3, 4 to the drum bus. So we have 2 different sends going on. We have our actual send and our IO send. Our IO send will be going out bus 1, going to our kick bus, then going out bus 3, 4 to our drum bus. So there is a lot of sending going on, but that's how we get it to sound real good. So let's take a listen to what we got right now. It feels like an appropriate amount of reverb for a bass drum. I like to keep it punchy. I don't want it to really be soaked. Let's hear what we got going on with the snare now if there's too much. I'd say that's incredibly too much. So let's go dig into that. Let's take those all down to around -6. Take a listen at that. Okay, so let's adjust this even. Let's go back to our kicks. We'll bring them up a little bit to 10. And now we'll go down to our drum reverb fader on the volume. Bring that fella down a little bit because it's just too hot. That sounded more like it. I'm going to go down to -10 here. That feels great to me now. It has a little bit on the kick drum. There's a bunch on that snare. And let's take a listen to what the toms are going to sound like now. See if they're too much because we didn't adjust them yet. Yes, they are a bit too much. So click in there. I'm going to adjust them down to -12s as well. And these are all judgment calls I'm making. I just making them from experience. I like to have a little bit more on my snare than I do on my toms. If they sounds great on your toms, go ahead. Keep it a little bit hotter. Great. Let's hear what my overheads are looking like. They're right at that -12 mark. These should be looking pretty good. Fantastic. So we could clear all these solos. We don't need them anymore. We're working with the whole track. And the beauty of doing this aux bus when we're doing this reverb is that we could raise the reverb just by raising this volume up and down. So if we're feeling like, hey, this is a little light, I'll show you what happens if we raise the volume up. So right where you found where you really want things, that's where you can start making moves over here. How much reverb do you want? Once you balance all the instruments, how much reverb do you really want on the individual track? And that'll change as you go by. Right now, it might feel like, hey, man, we got a lot of reverb on here. But just wait until we add in guitars and everything like that. The reverb will get lost in the mix a little bit. So you could add it in there. It helps smooth things out and everything. But here we are with our drum reverb track set up. Play around with this, get it sounding perfect to you. But here's our starting point. Sounds pretty great to me. All right, thanks for being with me on this one. I'll see you on the next one.